Hello everyone, this is part 3 of Unit 10 UGC NET JRF Forensic Science. In this part, we will discuss about injuries and wounds. Injuries are defined under Section 44 of Indian Penal Code or IPC. These are harm caused to a person on body, mind, reputation or property. Injuries are also known as physical trauma. Injuries are also known as trauma. Can be physical or mental. Physical trauma is defined as when there is an external force which is applied on a living body. There is a break in the natural continuation of the tissues. So this is known as physical trauma, and mental trauma would be related to the mind. Wound means injury where there is breach of skin or mucous membrane. Now the classification of injuries. Medical classification is based on the cause of the injury. So they can be mechanical or physical, thermal, chemical and miscellaneous injuries. Legal classification of injuries is based on the severity of injury. How serious is the injury? So these are classified as hurt and grievous hurt. Hurt falls under section 319 of IPC, and these are the simple injuries, whereas grievous hurt falls under section 320 of IPCs, and these injuries have long-term effects and can be fatal. Now the medico-legal classification of injuries, it is based on the nature of injuries. First is suicidal injuries, multiple superficial cuts that are due to that are also known as hesitation wounds. Before the fatal wound, these wounds are sometimes the person make these wounds fast. Then the homicidal injuries, or that are caused in murders, accidental injuries, defense injuries, self-inflicted or fabricated injuries, and iatrogenic injuries that are caused by during surgeries. And based on the time of infliction, injuries are classified as antemortem or postmortem. Antemortem is further classified as recent and old, when the injury is there, so based on the time of infliction. Now the details about the injuries, we'll cover them one by one. First is mechanical or physical injuries. So these are caused by physical violence. They can be divided into two, blunt force injuries and sharp force injuries. Firearm wounds also are categorized into these. So blunt force injuries are abrasion, contusion or bruise, lacerated wound, fracture or dislocation of bone or tooth. Whereas sharp force injuries are incised wound, stab wound, fracture or dislocation of bone or tooth. So it depends on the depth and the severity. Basically, the sharp force wound is caused by sharp tools such as knives, etc., whereas blunt force tools can be due to bricks, etc. So fracture or dislocation of bone or tooth can be considered as blunt force or sharp force depending on which tool has been used. So this is the representation of the injuries. In abrasion, you can see only epidermis gets affected. In bruise or contusion, in which we can also name as kneel in Hindi. So in bruise, dermis gets affected. It is known as intradermal bruise when the bruise is up to the subcutaneous tissue. This is laceration by blunt force. So you can see here the irregular lining. This is the incised or stab wound. There is regular lining and the depth is more. Now, brush burns or graze, it is a form of abrasion. Abrasion where only the epidermis is affected, and it is caused by friction of rapidly moving objects against skin. Contusion or bruise in which there is internal bleeding, and there is blood will leak from the injured capillary to the and will be collected in the subcutaneous tissues. Hematoma is the collection of blood outside the blood vessels. Ectopic bruise is the appearance of bruise away from the site of impact. Tramline bruises these are injuries inflicted by iron rod. Incised looking abrasion when blunt force is applied at very high speed. Avulsed laceration. So avulsed lacerations are tearing off a portion of skin, tissue or organ. These are normally observed in traffic accident cases and also known as flaying. Length in its greatest dimension and tailing give indication of direction of incised wounds. The bridging of tissues. Bridging means some part of tissue should be hanging along the skin, and it is the class characteristic of lacerated wounds. The length of wound depends to the size of blade and the type of stab wound, the pressure applied, etc. Bruise or contusion. So within few hours to 3 days the color will be blue and it is due to deoxyhemoglobin. From 4 to 5 days the color will be bluish black to brown due to hemosiderin. 5 to 6 days green color due to biliverdin. 7 to 12 days yellow color due to bilirubin. Now the bruise and the scab color. Fresh to 24 hours bright red. 2 to 3 days reddish brown scab. 4 to 5 days dark brown scab. 5 to 7 days brownish black scab. 7 to 12 days scab dries and falls off. Now about the beveling cut or wound. So it occurs due to a sharp weapon when it's entered obliquely and caused bevel margin on one side and undermining on the other side. That means a slight fold is there. So this beveling or fold indicates the direction of the wound, and it is observed in incised wounds. It can be lacerated if present in the skull area due to striking of the bullet. Pupe's rule, when there are more than 2 fracture lines, the course of later fracture is always interpreted by the pre-existing fracture lines. So as we have studied in glass fractures, so the existing fractures will limit the other fracture. To summarize the mechanical injuries, so this is contusion or bruise, this is abrasion, it is still here you can see it affects only epidermis layer. This is the lacerated wound. So in this you can see the irregular lining is there and the length of the wound is more than its depth. This is the incised wound where the length of the wound is less than the depth of the wound. Here length is more, depth is less. Here depth is more, length is less. And the regular lining is there. This is caused by sharp object. This is caused by blunt object. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more such videos. Thank you.